Project Zomboid is an isometric horror survival game with some of the most intense survival mechanics that you'll find in any survival game. And that made me wonder, could we build the perfect car? Could we even build a car that's 80% or say 90%? Yes, it is theoretically possible to do this challenge, but what does the journey there actually look like? That is what we're going to find out today. And I can assure you things did not go to plan, and it was not as simple as I thought. Hello there friends, Newbornkilik here, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a Project Zomboid challenge. Rules of this challenge will be given as they are relevant. First and foremost is our goal to get a vehicle with all of its components up to 90%. First decision I had to make was between either choosing the mechanic or the burglar. Burglar having the option to hotwire cars from the get-go, while the mechanic starts off with a couple of levels in the mechanic skill, which will be very important for installing and uninstalling the different parts that we need to find. Eventually I decided to go with mechanic, and this is Solomon Greenberg. He's a relatively talented man in the arts of going fast and driving car. But he's also a very thirsty boy. This would end up being a huge mistake later, but for now we spawned into a house with nothing really of note in the area, so for our challenge, a pretty unlucky spawn. I'm not sure why I have those. Maybe they're my wife's. I was just kidding. I don't have a wife. Oh shit, maybe I actually don't have a wife. I'm starting to get a really good picture about our guy Solomon Greenberg here. Yep, nope. I am super divorced. In the entire house, I only found one source of liquid that wasn't water, and that was a small flask of vodka, which would have to last us until we were able to make it to a store or at least find something else to drink. Which brings us to rule number 2, which is we are not allowed to drink any water or any healthy food. Essentially, if it's not processed food, we can't eat it. But first, it would be important to secure a base of operations. I decided that the house we spawned into would do just fine, but we did need to clear the area out to make it safe. So, time to go say hello to the neighbors. You know, Greg, you're a little more bitey than I remember. Well, this hasn't made the situation any better. Now by this time, I was starting to get a bit thirsty. Up in the top right, you can see these different circles with the different icons in them. These are called moodles. Moodles are essentially how your character will tell you how they're feeling. If they're thirsty, you'll see a thirst moodle. If they're hungry, a hunger moodle. There are so many different types of moodles in the game, and they all mean different things. The most important ones will be the tired moodle, the thirsty, hungry, and pain moodles. These will all have negative side effects. Part of the challenge of the game is managing these moodles so that your character can stay in tip-top condition. For example, when your character is tired, they can have up to a 95% decrease in their melee damage, as well as some other nasty side effects. Fighting things while you're tired really isn't even an option. Just outside the house, we managed to find a duffel bag, which is an insane early game find. Huh, would you look at that? Found some cow's milk and tried adding the vodka to it to maybe help extend the milk a little bit. Turns out that doesn't really work. Milk and vodka, not all that nutritious. And probably really disgusting, actually. After searching the nearby houses, I had a decent supply of food, mostly ice cream and chicken nuggets, but I was still sorely lacking in the beverage department. This is mostly because I foolishly took the high thirst trait. The high thirst trait essentially just means that our character will get thirsty more often. About an hour into this challenge, I started to realize the error of taking this trait. Disallowing water is going to end up being a pretty big disadvantage with this setup. I guess it's a good time to explain combat. Combat in Project Zomboid can be quite slow and methodical. Project Zomboid heavily rewards positioning and patience. Every time you swing your weapon, you get a little bit of muscle strain. And once your muscles are tired, you'll do less damage. It'll also take up some of your character's energy and make them tired faster. This means that the most effective way to take care of zombies would be to kill them as quickly as possible. One of the best ways to do this is to go to a fence and have them crawl over the fence. This will make it so that they have to crawl over and will be easily dispatched. There are still some risks to this strategy, but it's far less than having to smash every single zombie about 5 to 6 times before they finally go down. Very important to note that every single action that you take in this game does have an effect on your character. So running, attacking will all make your character tired, and you'll be less effective at doing certain actions like combat or climbing fences. In some cases you can even fail to climb a fence, which is pretty much a death sentence if you're being followed by a horde. Eventually we secured a local supermarket, which would give us access to a large but not infinite amount of food and drinks. It would still end up being a pretty big problem, but at least we had a bit of a safety net. However, all these windows on the front make for a relatively poor base, as zombies can easily see in and will essentially be besieging us at all times. This means we need to find a way to take care of the zombies nearby. By this time in the day, I was already pretty tired, so fighting the crowd would be a pain, and leaving them to fester would only result in them, trying to crawl into bed with me, which I'm not particularly a fan of. So I decided to round up as many zombies as I could and led them into the forest like some kind of weird Pied Piper kind of guy. This doesn't solve the problem, but it does give us some breathing room before they eventually wander back this way. That is a problem for future Newbornkilik, and right now, I need to sleep. Starting day 2, I decided to allow the use of mods. A lot of them are just quality of life things, and in some cases may even make my life more difficult. Playing Project Zomboid without a lot of the mods that I've grown to know and love can be a bit taxing. Either way, we will be using a couple of quality of life mods, but yeah, I know some people are going to be disappointed about it, but for right now, we're just going to use mods. I slept for the night and was able to go out the next day fully refreshed and look at a few cars. Nothing really stuck out on this day specifically. I mean, there were a couple of pretty nice cars, but nothing that I really wanted to run with, and not picking burglar and not being able to hotwire cars was ending up being quite a pain, to be honest. Luckily, I did manage to find a truck with key in the ignition, which would work well enough for getting around. The next problem, you notice it's 3 p.m. and our character's already tired. That's because we had to sleep on the floor. We didn't get very good sleep last night, so I guess next thing I should do is fix the sleeping situation in some way, but that's gonna cut into the amount of time that I have to look for a car. I think it's worth going out and finding a bed. Luckily, I was able to find a nice comfy armchair in one of the nearby houses, but you can really see that tired moodle taking effect at the moment. I'm just absolutely slamming this zombie over and over, and he's on the ground, but I'm just having to hammer the zombie over and over. When you're asking yourselves, why don't you just, clear out the hordes? That is exactly why. A lot of times it's just not worth it. But eventually we were able to escape with our armchair, and we now had a comfy place to sleep. I then slept for the night, and we made an excursion out to a nearby auto shop, which had some brand new parts for us to put into our vehicle, as well as a gas station / convenience store. Would probably make a better base than the one we have already, as well as being relatively well stocked. It was about this time that I realized the real challenge of the run, aside from, having to actually build the car, or the zomboids, or the thirst problem, and that's that we were almost constantly going to be overweight, or at least gaining weight. As it turns out, eating nothing but unhealthy, calorie-dense food is pretty bad for you. So eventually, we would end up being overweight, which is yet another debuff. And thus you can kind of start seeing how these things can stack up, and eventually your character just kind of fails at one little thing at a critical moment and, gets bitten or swarmed by the zombies and your run's over. And for some reason, we Project Zomboid players absolutely love it, but we have a car to deal with. I was able to find a nice black truck with a cover that I figured would be a good starting point. Now, most of the components of this vehicle were pretty good to begin with. There were a couple things that needed a little bit more work, but I would just find those parts and replace them or repair them as needed. So I towed my new prize back to the hardware store, so I had a safe place to work on it. It was definitely a bit of a fixer-upper, but damn it, we'd make it work. Starting day 3, I decided to go out and find a couple new cars. We found some pretty good candidates, and probably, honestly, some were better than the ones that I was going to work on, but something to take in mind is there are different types of vehicles. You have heavy-duty vehicles, standard vehicles, and sports cars, and the parts don't mix for these, unfortunately, so we would have to try and pick a vehicle that was common enough that we could actually find the components to swap out. This would make probably a standard car the best option. Right now, we have a heavy-duty vehicle in this truck that we're going to be working on, but as you'll find out relatively soon, it's not going to be our biggest problem anyway, as things were about to go very poorly very quickly, which is actually very common for this game. After heading back into base to put our new components in and make a short checklist of what we would need, the checklist ended up being pretty long. I removed most of the components that weren't going to mix, and in doing so, I realized that you can't take the glove box out. Okay. Alright, so that means that we need to find a vehicle out in the wild that has a glove box and heater above 90%, and then I could fix pretty much anything from that point on. a lot of times you would be able to find a vehicle with a decent glove box or a decent heater, but having both of them be above 90%, hell, having both of them be above 80% was pretty difficult. For context, there are no brand new cars in this game, so you won't go out and find a car that's all 100%. At least I never have. Even if you go to like a car dealership, you're not going to find a car that is in perfect condition. Exploring some of the nearby vehicles, I found probably the most strapped spiffo delivery driver I've ever seen. I mean, bro's just got an M1911 in the glove box. That same vehicle. The strapped spiffo driver apparently really loved keeping his heater and glove box in good condition, as I found both of those above 80%. Now, here's where I made a critical error to myself. Okay, I found these. This must not be all that rare. I didn't realize how good I had it at this point in the challenge. I made the call that I wanted it to be even more perfect than this vehicle was right here. And I decided to go for a 90% vehicle. But you'll notice the rest of the video, that was a mistake, but this portion of the run ended up being invalid anyway. I'll play you a clip and maybe you can see why. Keep an eye on the moodles up in the top right. That's right, our character has committed the cardinal sin of taking a little sippy. You see, in Project Zomboid, there's an accessibility setting that makes it so that you don't have to constantly be clicking in your inventory, much like I have to right now, and your character will automatically take drinks of water if it's in their inventory. However, I thought it would be funny to just dump the water on the ground. I don't really know why I decided to do that, but apparently if your character even touches any bottle of water, he'll just go ahead and take a little, he'll just take a little sippy before he starts pouring it out. And also I turned off the setting that made it so that he would automatically drink, so that, for sure, this never happened again. I might have been willing to let it slide, but I'm not entirely sure how many times throughout this run that it's happened, and the thirst has really been the one component that's actually been an issue. I haven't mentioned it too much because I don't want to get too crazy with this specific run because it ended up being a failure anyway. So unfortunately, he needed to be dealt with. But this was kind of a blessing in disguise. You see, we were still pretty early in the challenge, so I decided making a new character wasn't the worst idea in the world, and we will be able to get rid of that high thirst trait and even replace it with a low thirst trait. So that'll be one life down and a completely new world. And thus, Marvin Duval was born. Marvin Duval is very much so like his predecessor in that he cannot drink any sort of water, and if he does, he'll die. Marvin's initial spawn was actually pretty good. He spawned inside of the car fixation store, meaning that we already had access to a workshop, so we could at least work on our car in peace. However, you'll notice there are so many windows around, and this area left a lot to be desired. Just to the south of our humble little abode, we found a bar, which would at least wet our whistle for the time being. However, it also had some quantum zombies. You'll notice there's kind of a problem on this save. The zombies got kind of wacky, and I wasn't really sure what to make of this situation, so I just decided to leave. I have a motto in Project Zomboid, you see. If there's any situation that I'm not 100% sure about, I just choose to remove myself from it. Nearby, we were able to find a convenience store with a housing unit above it. We just needed to clear out the unwanted guests, and we would have both a hardware store and a convenience store right next to each other that would make for a great base. Exploring a nearby parking lot, I found a van that had a heater at 91 and a glove box at 87. This only served to reinforce the idea that this wouldn't be that big of a deal, so I set my eyes on getting a hold of this vehicle one way or another. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a key for it nearby. Soon after, I was able to find a decent vehicle with a key and even some gas. This would be the car that we would use to get around, but definitely wouldn't be the one that we'd be working on. Still, this would open up plenty of options for getting to the next town over and searching even more vehicles. Then found a wrecked cop car, which had a police duffel bag in it. Again, a very early find for that, as well as some guns, which probably I wouldn't be getting too much use out of. That's what we call foreshadowing, ladies and gentlemen. Found a relatively safe place to sleep for the night. and got some rest. Unfortunately, a nearby zombie was banging on the door and caused my character to have a panic attack, so I was unable to sleep for the rest of the night, but we at least got a couple hours of sleep. And you'll see in the clip I'm playing right now, one of the disadvantages to just leading zombies away from the area that you want to go to is, again, it kind of just kicks the can a little bit further down the road. Example, this was about 3 or 4 smaller groups that I had led away from a parking lot so that I could check on some other vehicles. Now they're just kind of a big problem. Eventually I would find a base that wasn't in town anyway, which would be far safer than anything that I would find here in town. So at that point, this horde would just be wasted time. On the whole thirst situation, you'll notice now that we have low thirst, our thirst moodle is not taking up nearly as quickly, so I'm gonna stop mentioning it for the rest of the run. The thirst moodle really isn't a factor. We're able to find so many canned beverages and other unhealthy beverages that while thirst was an issue while we had high thirst, now it's just almost completely a non-issue. Immediately starting off day 4, I found a nearly perfect vehicle. I don't think I've ever gotten this lucky with survivor vehicles. I've found like 6 already. This is just a standard apocalypse playthrough. But again, none of them have both a glove box and a heater that are suitable for the 90% challenge. Found a clunker and decided to put it in my shop so that I could work on maintenance a little bit. The idea behind getting higher maintenance would be so that we can more effectively take out and put in the different parts and other components from other vehicles that we find, because if you don't have a high enough maintenance skill, there's a chance of you damaging the part when you're trying to take it out or put it in, and it would be an absolute shame to have all the parts that we need and then mess them up while installing them. It was at this point that zombies started teleporting around and stuff. Sometimes this will happen on the unstable branch, build 42, which is what I'm playing on. I'm assuming it's due to the ragdoll physics. I really like the ragdoll, but it does sometimes on certain saves. After saving and loading a handful of times, you'll get these zombies that'll like teleport all over the place. But in this clip right here, you'll see my character just gets a random jump scare from a zombie that teleported into the house for like a frame and then just immediately left. And, you know, they're evolving, and that's terrifying. I haven't actually noticed them attack me, but they definitely terrify your character. So if you see a bunch of zombies flying around all over the place, sorry about that. My character didn't like it either. One of the better ways to dispatch a group of zombies, and that's just simply to use your vehicle. Now, while this is very easy and very effective, it's one, very hard on your vehicle, and 2, very loud, meaning that you're going to draw in more zombies and it may just end up being a larger problem in the long run. We had a couple close calls. You'll notice that any time that I enter a room, I immediately open the door and push. This is on purpose for this exact scenario. We almost got bitten here. Would have been a pretty nasty little bite. They're devious little guys. I swear they will always show up when you least expect it. If you're clearing out a house and you're 100% prepared for a zomboid to be in the room, you'll be fine. But the instant that you let your guard down, there'll be one standing right behind the door waiting for you, waiting to give you a little bit of a nibble. Then decided to go to, I'm pretty sure this is like a metalworking shop, just to see what I could find, maybe get some cars in the parking lot. I figured if I could go to some places of business, they might have some nice vehicles there. In the middle of this day, the helicopter event happened, and you're a little late on the air activity there, buddy. Of course, the radio that I was using decided to warn me as soon as I heard the chopper, which is just a little bit late, so I decided to bunker down here. We ended up making it through this okay, but it was still pretty spooky. Somehow the zomboids knew I was in here, even though there was absolutely no line of sight and I was just crouching the entire day. Either way, relatively manageable. The next day I found the American Tire Shop, which had a ton of really good automotive supplies that I could use, but of course we needed to take care of the locals first. After dispatching with them, we managed to keep the area and what I wanted to make our new base, or at least one of our new bases, in relatively good condition. Wasn't really much else to note for about an hour or so. I was just going around looking at different parking lots, just trying to find this vehicle that we would even be able to use as a template so the challenge could start. However, while clearing out a house, something interesting happened. I guess you could call it a skill issue, but it kind of a Project Zomboid moment. I'll play the clip and I can explain it a little bit afterward, but it just goes to show how absolutely devious these little guys can be. So it's pretty hard to tell exactly what happened in this clip, but what I'm pretty sure happened was I canceled the animation of them diving over the fence, but he got that little weird side stumble animation. Usually, whenever they're climbing over the fence, they'll flop onto the ground and be relatively harmless. If you push them over the fence, they can't do that lunge attack that you see the other zombie did. Apparently the game registered that he was on my side of the fence, and he was able to get a laceration on me, which I'll have to take care of. I don't know the exact stats on how likely a laceration is to be infected. I think it's around 25%, but because our character has such an aversion to water, I've also not been washing my clothes, so I'm very bloody, so I'm pretty sure that makes it more likely for us to become infected, but that's something that we'll have to worry about later. For now, we just need to take care of the injury and hopefully we can survive this. I also decided that I wasn't going to wash the bandages because I don't believe in using water. I even looked for mods that would cause my character to take damage in the water, but to make it at all interesting, it would have been very punishing and honestly just slow the whole playthrough down. So I decided to just go with that. I wouldn't use the water, so I won't be washing bandages, cleaning myself. 15 to 20 minutes later, in real time, my character became stressed, which if you've played Project Zomboid for any amount of time, you'll know is not a good sign. It means that there's a chance that I am infected. We're essentially on a timer at this point, but there is still hope. We haven't gotten nauseous yet, and that is one of the main indicators that we are infected, so we might still be okay after you have any sort of injury from a zomboid. Seeing that stressed Moodle show up is one of the most heartbreaking moments for a long run. Usually their pathing is a little bit better than that. However, later that night, my character would become queasy. If we were hanging around in winter time and maybe we had a cold, I wouldn't say that this is absolutely a death sentence, but the odds of us being infected after being stressed and being queasy the day after being attacked by a zombie, it's unfortunately probably the end for our character, so I decided to let him out with a bang. And always remember the number one rule: save the last round for yourself. This would also put us on our last life and a completely new world. For our third and final attempt, meet Buffmanster. And Buffmanster's spawn was probably the best out of all three, allowing for relatively quick acquisition of a vehicle, even a relatively light spawn on the zomboids around the gas station. I also decided to throw out an inventory Tetris mod. It doesn't really affect too much. If anything, it probably makes things more difficult for me, but I like mixing it up between playthroughs. This is honestly one of my favorite mods. Realistically, we've been through this before. There's really going to be nothing of note. Alright, found a car. Pretty solid start on it. Well, realistically, we're exactly where we were before, because we weren't actually accomplished all that much. We won't be able to accomplish that much until we find a car that's above 90%. Or I just have to admit that this is a dumb idea, and I searched some more. And a couple days in, I even found 3 vehicles that were so close to fitting our criteria, all in an intersection just to the south of town. Among all the wrecked cars, there were 3 vehicles that were so close to meeting exactly what we needed, and that was actually so disheartening. Another 92. Oh, come on. It's so close to being good. Oh my god. They're right next to each other too. There are 3 cars here with a heater or glove box above 90. That's just not cool, man. That's really sad. Oh, I hate that for me. I feel like the odds of finding 3 good vehicles in an intersection like that are relatively low, let alone when all 3 of them have either the heater or the glove box above 90%. So after completely exhausting yet another town after that, I decided I would just use mods. I'm gonna find a suitable vehicle and we're gonna get on with this challenge. I ended up going with a mod that allows you to repair most of the components on vehicles, but I'll only be using it for the heater and the glove box to get them up to 90%. And then my idea behind this whole challenge was to go out and collect the other components and sort of have this scavenger hunt with all the zombies around and whatnot. It seemed like a lot more fun than just the RNG fest that ended up happening. So I know some of you might say, oh, the challenge was failed. You had to use a mod to accomplish your goal. And you're right. So the goal now would be to grab one of those really good vehicles from the intersection, bring it back to American Tires, and fix it up from there. I actually ended up going with one of the warehouses in Moldra. There were a couple times when I got in a bit of trouble by driving too fast. The worst one I unfortunately don't have recorded because I already have 10 to 12 hours of footage to go through, and I decided I didn't need to record every single thing. But yeah, I'd had a pretty nasty accident and then a little fender bender directly after, just as I was saying that I need to start paying more attention while driving. The damage we're looking at. Damn, put that front left window up, dude. That's not good. Might need to replace the front left and front right windows. Anyway, yeah, ouchies. I was paying attention to my speed. Oh, and it blended right in, dude. Everything's turning to shambles. Messing with my cruise control, just thinking I need to be a little more careful. And yes, I do. And it's at this point in the video I find myself in a weird position. So on the one hand, I've already explained most of what's going on, and a lot of it is just kind of getting back to where we were, as well as going out and finding these different components. But at the same time, I want to create an interesting narrative with Buff Manster as well. I think we just hit the absolute highlights and skip to the part where everything starts to go wrong. So we had managed to find a pretty good vehicle in that intersection and managed to get a handful of really good components into it when a Project Zomboid moment happened. You see, all I wanted was to sleep in a bed. I decided to carve out a new base that would be right next to our warehouse. That we'd be able to quickly go over to our vehicle since I lack the carpentry skills to actually disassemble a bed. Carpentry is another skill in the game that you can level up, and you need level 2 carpentry to successfully take down and put back up bed. So I've been sleeping in armchairs at this point. I figured I would go to one of the nearby houses, clear it out real quick with my vehicle if needed, and finally sleep in a bed for the first time in probably a handful of days. But do you remember how I mentioned that these zomboids like to hang out in places that they really shouldn't be in? This is an area that I have been through extensively. I've never actually been inside of this house, but I have honked my horn around this area so many times, and all of the windows were completely unbroken. I got too confident, and it cost me. That is a bite, and it is 100% fatal. And that's just kind of how this game goes. Any one zombie isn't going to be a problem. It's when you start to lose focus, when you have a slight lapse in judgment, that one of them will inevitably end up sneaking up on you. Maybe you let your moodles get a little bit unmanaged, or maybe you forget to push when you go into a room, or you just blindly run into the darkness because it's super close. Now, keep in mind, this has actually been a couple of in-game weeks, so at this point I had a couple of options, and one of which would be to just make the best vehicle that we could. And that's what I decided to do. I decided to get welding up to 2. This is one of those things that I knew I had to do in the back of my mind, but now that we were on a time constraint, our character only has 2 to 3 days at max. So we need to get this done ASAP. You can level up your welding from level 0 to level 2, which is a level required to fix the heaters and the glove box. And I had just enough propane to work on these car wrecks around where I found the vehicle that we'll be using. Nearby, I was able to find a front door, as well as a tire, a muffler that we'd be able to use for our vehicle. These components weren't perfect or even above 90%, but I figured they would still be better than absolutely nothing so that we could at least drive our vehicle. And generally they were above 80-ish% anyway, so close enough for right now. Checking back through Rosewood, we had a handful of close calls with the hordes of zombies, but we were able to make it out of Rosewood with the rest of the components that we would need. I wasn't entirely sure if I actually needed a front windshield or if maybe a back windshield would work. Like maybe they just consider it to be a windshield and not necessarily a front and back windshield, but luckily we were able to find an actual windshield in Rosewood that would suit our purposes. And that was one of the last components that we were missing to make at least a functional vehicle that was really good. So with my car stocked back up, we traveled back to Moldera. On the way back to Moldera to put all of our components into our vehicle, something happened that I think is one of the first BS parts of this game. So given the isometric view of the game, some things will be obstructed. And do you see? I didn't see it at the time. There is a car behind that sign that I simply cannot register as a vehicle, and exactly what you think would happen happens. Oh, dude. Behind the billboard is diabolical. So we got back and started putting the components into our vehicle when, yet again, as if I thought that that was going to be the last middle finger the game was going to give me, there was just randomly a horde outside of my base. I've never seen this many zombies just sort of gather outside your base with absolutely no prompting. So I needed to figure out a way to deal with those. And as you'll notice, my vehicle that I would normally use to deal with them is pretty banged up. I was able to lead them away from the base and they just kind of scattered mercifully. I knew I didn't have very much time left, so I wasn't worried about killing all of them, and this would have to do for now. Cleaning up the stragglers, we were able to put the rest of the components that we had collected into our vehicle. At the end of it all, this is what we'd be left with. A pretty damn good vehicle by all accounts, but just short of that 90 baseline that we wanted it to be. So I thought, we're in a warehouse with plenty of supplies, why not put this mod to use and see what we can actually get this vehicle up to. Can we get it up to 95% overall? That would be wonderful. So I completely stripped all of the repairing components out of this warehouse. It was just shy of 95% overall quality, which, I'll take as a win. It was finally time to take our new ride out for a test drive. You know how I thought that random horde was going to be the last middle finger? No, because the game had one more unexpected event for me. At this thing go. Controls like a dream. Oh, that's nice. What do you mean my front right tire fell off? There's no shot that happened. Where did it go? After all this, I forgot to put the fucking lug nuts in? Are you kidding me? Luckily, we hadn't actually driven even a block, so finding the tire was relatively easy, but I didn't even know that that could happen. I guess it's because my character's so tired, he's just forgetting steps on his mechanics, even though he is quite adept at it. And now that we had our nice new vehicle, which I gotta say, controls like a dream, having a car that's this good feels really nice. Buffmanster here decided to do the one thing that he wanted to do with his perfect vehicle, and that is go fast. And whatever happens at that point, happens. And so Buffmanster did go fast indeed, until he was met with a roadblock, which he tried to circumvent, but apparently getting into a car crash can be way more fatal in this game than I was anticipating. Oh shit! Oh my god! Oh no! What just happened? I wasn't even going that fast. Oh my god, I just got ejected from the vehicle and slammed into a tree. And Buffmanster was immediately ejected from his vehicle and then apparently run over by said vehicle, which I would say is quite the way to go. So in the end, were we able to build the perfect car? Technically, yes. And you could even in vanilla, but let's be honest, it's just an RNG fest. But either way, I had a lot of fun with this one. The scavenger hunt portion of it was pretty fun, but trying to find just the perfect vehicle got pretty disheartening around hour 14. But anyway, with that in mind, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. It's helped me out an awful lot. If you like this style of challenge video, please do let me know. I'm interested in doing more videos like this, not necessarily on Project Zomboid, but on whatever game might take my fancy. So let me know of any other challenges that you might have ideas for in the comments down below. Thank you so much to my patrons, channel members, and Twitch supporters. I'm Newbornkilik, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm out.